The room was silent. A single spotlight cut through the darkness, and in that beam stood a man who had already rewritten music history, yet was about to rewrite the laws of physics. The camera rolled, and suddenly, Michael Jackson lifted from the floor, suspended in midair, as if gravity itself had lost its grip. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't a trick of light. This was Michael Jackson, and he was about to perform the most impossible dance move the world would never officially see. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss another untold story. Michael Jackson wasn't just the king of pop, he was a master illusionist, a choreographer of the impossible, and a relentless perfectionist who believed dance was more than movement. For him, dance was language. It was emotion. It was architecture in motion. Every step had a purpose, every pause a meaning, every breath a story. The moonwalk made him immortal. The lean and smooth criminal made him legendary. But hidden deep within rehearsal rooms, behind locked studio doors, and inside archives few have ever seen, there exists a movement that even his closest collaborators still speak of in whispers. They called it the ghost step. A dance move so strange, so physically implausible that dancers who witnessed it questioned their own eyes. A move that made Michael Jackson appear to float, not lean, not slide, not glide, but hover. Weightless, detached from the floor, suspended between earth and air for nearly 3 seconds. No wires, no visible support, no digital enhancement. Just Michael Jackson and the void beneath his feet. The night the studio fell silent. It was late in 1987. Michael Jackson was deep into rehearsals for what would become one of the most iconic music videos in history, Smooth Criminal. The set was massive. The dancers were elite. The expectations were impossible. And Michael, as always, wanted more. More innovation, more danger, more magic. Inside a rehearsal studio in Los Angeles, mirrors lined the walls. Sweat soaked the wooden floors. The air vibrated with rhythm, breath, and exhaustion. His dancers had already repeated the choreography dozens of times. The lean-forward move, later made famous with patented shoes, was being refined. But Michael wasn't satisfied. According to multiple insiders, he stopped the music suddenly. He paced. He stared at the floor, then at the mirror, then at the dancers, and finally he looked at the camera crew. "I want something they've never seen," he reportedly said, "not even once." Then he asked for everyone to step back. What happened next is the moment that still haunts those who witnessed it. Michael Jackson took the microphone in his hand, closed his eyes, and began to move not to music but to silence. His steps were slow, controlled, deliberate. His breathing deepened. His shoulders relaxed. His knees bent. Then, without warning, he lifted. Not jumped, not leaned, not spun. He lifted. His heels left the floor. His toes followed. And for nearly 3 seconds, a lifetime in dance, Michael Jackson hovered. The room froze. One dancer dropped his water bottle. Another stepped back in shock. A camera operator thought the lens had malfunctioned. One of the producers whispered, "Did he just float?" Michael landed silently. And the room erupted. The move that was never meant to exist. Michael Jackson didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply looked at the mirror and said, "It's not clean enough." That sentence alone tells you everything about him. Most dancers would have fallen to the floor in triumph after performing something that defied physics. But Michael Jackson wasn't chasing applause. He was chasing perfection, and perfection in his mind was invisible, effortless, unbelievable. He practiced the move again, and again, and again. Each time the hover became smoother, the landing softer, the illusion stronger. This movement, later nicknamed the ghost step by his dancers, was never officially choreographed. It wasn't written down. It wasn't taught to others. It existed only in Michael's body. And that's where the danger began. The first injury. Michael's team, as brilliant as they were, couldn't resist trying. One dancer attempted it the next day. He bent his knees, inhaled deeply, mimicked Michael's posture, and jumped. He came down wrong. His ankle fractured. Another dancer tried 2 days later. He strained his Achilles tendon. A third pulled a hamstring. A fourth tore a ligament. Word spread quickly: do not attempt the ghost step. Michael was devastated. He never wanted anyone to get hurt for his art. He believed in pushing limits, but never at the cost of someone else's body. And yet, he continued practicing it himself. The secret rehearsals. What the public doesn't know is that Michael Jackson performed the ghost step only 7 times in his life, all during closed rehearsals. Not once on stage. Not once on television. Not once in public. These 7 performances were captured on rehearsal footage that remains locked away in Sony's private archives. Only a handful of executives, choreographers, and engineers have ever seen it. Why was it never released? Because it terrified the people who saw it. Not in a horror movie way, but in a deeper, more unsettling way. The move looked unnatural, too smooth, too controlled, too perfect, like something the human body shouldn't be able to do. One former engineer described it as watching someone step out of the laws of biology. Another said it didn't look like dance, it looked like a glitch in reality. The theories begin. Once word of the ghost step began circulating among dancers and insiders, theories exploded. Some believed Michael Jackson had discovered a secret breathing technique, a way to control oxygen flow so precisely that he could momentarily suspend his center of gravity. Others believed he had trained his muscles to an extreme degree, developing an unheard-of level of core strength and tendon elasticity. Some whispered about invisible wires, hidden supports, or even stage manipulation. But those who saw it firsthand rejected all of that. There were no wires. There were no harnesses. There was no mechanical assistance. The room was empty. The floor was flat. The lights were on. And Michael floated anyway. The body as an instrument. To understand how Michael Jackson might have achieved something like the ghost step, you have to understand how he viewed his body. Michael didn't see his body as a physical object. He saw it as an instrument. Just like a violinist tunes their strings, Michael tuned his muscles. Just like a pianist practices scales, Michael practiced isolation. Just like a singer trains breath control, Michael trained silence, moments of complete stillness inside motion. He once said, "The best dancers don't move. They stop moving in the right places." Michael trained with ballet masters, with jazz legends, with street dancers, with martial artists, with mime performers, with illusionists. He studied gravity. He studied inertia. He studied momentum. And he studied stillness. The stillness that moves. One of the strangest things about the ghost step wasn't the lift, it was the pause. Michael didn't rise and fall quickly. He rose and stayed. That pause, that moment where nothing seemed to happen, was what made the move impossible. In physics, any vertical lift requires force, momentum, or mechanical assistance, but Michael's movement showed none of these. There was no visible jump, no bend and spring, no bounce. It was as if he had simply chosen not to fall. And that terrified people. Because if gravity didn't apply to him in that moment, what else did? Why, he retired the move. After multiple dancers were injured, Michael made a decision. He would never perform the ghost step again. Not on stage. Not in rehearsal. Not for cameras. Not even alone. He believed the move was too dangerous, not for himself, but for the legacy it might leave. He didn't want dancers trying to copy something that could destroy their bodies. And perhaps more importantly, he didn't want the world to believe something impossible was achievable by force. Michael always said his magic came from feeling, not from pushing. He retired the move quietly. No announcement. No explanation. Just silence. And over time, the story faded. The lost footage. In the early 2000s, rumors began circulating that Sony possessed rehearsal tapes containing footage of the ghost step. Several archivists confirmed that unusual footage existed, but none were allowed to describe it. One insider claimed that during a private viewing, an executive turned to him and said, "This will never be released. People aren't ready to see this." Why? Because the footage didn't just show dance. It showed something else. Something unexplainable. The difference between illusion and transcendence. Michael Jackson was known for illusions: the moonwalk, the lean, the spin and freeze, the instant pivot. But every illusion had a mechanical explanation. The ghost step did not. That's what made it different. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't choreography. It wasn't spectacle. It was transcendence. Michael didn't move through space. He left it. The 7 performances. According to those who witnessed them, each of the 7 performances of the ghost step was different. The first was unstable, beautiful but shaky. The second was smoother. The third lasted longer. The fourth included a rotation. The fifth ended in a silent toe landing. The sixth was performed while holding a microphone. And the seventh was perfect. 3 full seconds of suspension. No wobble. No sound. No breath. Just Michael Jackson, suspended between reality and something else. After that, he never did it again. The emotional weight of silence. Michael Jackson carried a heavy emotional world inside him. Fame had isolated him. Success had imprisoned him. Genius had distanced him from others. Dance was where he spoke without words. The ghost step, some believe, wasn't just a physical movement, it was an emotional expression. A moment of escape, a moment of weightlessness, a moment of freedom from gravity, expectation, and pain. In that 3-second hover, Michael wasn't a superstar. He wasn't a product. He wasn't a brand. He was just a soul floating. Why no one can copy it. Decades later, elite dancers have attempted to recreate the ghost step based on descriptions alone. None have succeeded. Biomechanists have analyzed frame-by-frame breakdowns of similar movements. Physicists have run simulations. Dancers have trained for years trying to replicate the conditions. Nothing works. Not even close. Because the ghost step wasn't about technique. It was about control. Not just muscle control, emotional control. Breath control. Time control. Space control. And something deeper. Self-control. Michael Jackson had mastered something no one else had. The ability to become invisible inside his own movement. The cost of genius. Michael Jackson paid a price for his art. Physically. Emotionally. Mentally. His body was fragile, his mind was restless, his soul was sensitive. Yet he gave everything he had to his craft. Every rehearsal, every take, every step, every pause. The ghost step was perhaps the ultimate symbol of that sacrifice. A movement so pure, so extreme, so impossible, that it could only exist once. And then never again. The legacy of the impossible. Michael Jackson changed the world of dance forever. He made the moonwalk global. He made the lean legendary. He made silence powerful. He made stillness speak. And somewhere, hidden away in an archive, lies proof of a movement that may never be seen again, a movement that transcended choreography and entered myth. The ghost step. The move no one can copy. The move no one can explain. The move Michael Jackson left behind, like a whisper in gravity. The final question: did Michael Jackson truly defy gravity? Or did he simply understand it better than anyone else ever has? Maybe the truth lies somewhere in between. Maybe the ghost step wasn't about physics. Maybe it wasn't about dance. Maybe it was about belief. Because for 3 seconds, the world believed Michael Jackson could fly. And in that belief, he did. Michael Jackson once said, "The greatest education in the world is watching the masters at work." And perhaps the greatest mystery in music history isn't what Michael Jackson showed us, but what he chose to hide. The ghost step wasn't meant to be seen. It was meant to be felt. And those who felt it never forgot it. And yet, the story does not end there. Because the ghost step was not the only movement Michael Jackson ever created that vanished into silence. It was simply the most haunting. Long after the rehearsal room lights went dark, long after the mirrors were covered, long after the dancers had gone home, Michael Jackson often stayed behind alone. This was his ritual. This was where the real work began, not the choreography, not the staging, not the costume design, but the communion between his body and the music that lived only inside his mind. Those who worked closest with him said Michael was never done rehearsing. Even after a routine was perfected, approved, and finalized, he would return to it alone, stripping it down, rebuilding it, searching for something invisible. Not applause, not approval, not perfection, but truth. And truth, to Michael Jackson, lived in moments that no one else could see. The dance between breath and silence. Michael Jackson's relationship with breath was unlike any performer in history. Most dancers breathe to survive movement. Michael breathed to control movement. He once told a vocal coach, "Breath is the engine of stillness." That sentence puzzled everyone until they watched him dance. Michael could stop mid-motion and remain completely still, not rigid, not frozen, but alive while the world moved around him. That stillness was not emptiness. It was energy held in suspension. The ghost step, many believe, was born from that mastery. He wasn't lifting himself into the air. He was suspending himself in stillness. And stillness, when mastered, can become indistinguishable from flight. The studio that knew his secrets. There was a particular rehearsal studio in Los Angeles, small, unassuming, hidden from the main roads, where Michael Jackson often worked late into the night. It had wooden floors worn thin by decades of dancers, mirrors that reflected not just movement but obsession, and a silence so deep you could hear your own heartbeat. This studio was where many of his most legendary moves were born. The spin and freeze, the toe stand, the anti-gravity lean, and yes, the ghost step. One janitor who worked the night shift at that studio later recalled hearing music long after everyone had left, sometimes at 2 a.m., sometimes at 3 a.m., sometimes until sunrise. He never saw Michael directly, but he saw his reflection in the mirror once, moving, stopping, staring at himself, then starting again. When asked what Michael looked like in that moment, the janitor said, "He didn't look like a man dancing. He looked like someone trying to remember how to fly." The price of being first. Michael Jackson was not interested in being the best dancer in the room. He was interested in being the first. First to move like that. First to stop like that. First to make people feel like that. And being first comes with a cost, because there is no map, no instruction manual, no guidebook. Every movement Michael created came from trial, error, pain, and persistence. He trained until his feet bled. He practiced until his legs trembled. He repeated sequences until his muscles memorized silence. And yet, he never spoke about his pain publicly. Because for Michael, pain wasn't something to complain about. It was something to transform. The body that refused to obey limits. Doctors who examined Michael Jackson over the years were baffled by his physiology. His muscle tone did not match his frame. His flexibility exceeded expected ranges. His tendon elasticity was abnormal. His pain tolerance was unusually high. And his neurological response time, the speed at which his brain communicated with his muscles, was faster than average. In simpler terms, Michael's body was wired differently. Not superhuman, not inhuman, but optimized, like a machine tuned to a frequency no one else could hear. And when that machine was driven by obsession, it produced miracles. The 7 witnesses. The 7 performances of the Ghost Step were witnessed by different people, choreographers, dancers, engineers, producers, but none of them were in the room for all 7. That means no single person saw the move evolve from beginning to end. Each witness saw only a fragment of its journey. Yet when their stories are compared, a pattern emerges. The movement became quieter over time. Not louder, not bigger, not flashier. Quieter. The lift became smoother. The landing became softer. The pause became longer. And the expression on Michael's face changed, from concentration to calm, from effort to serenity. By the 7th performance, those who saw it said Michael looked peaceful. Not intense. Not strained. Peaceful. As if he had finally reached something. And then he stopped. The moment he let it go. One of Michael's longtime collaborators later recalled a conversation that took place after the 7th performance. Michael was sitting alone, staring at the floor silent. Someone asked him, "Why don't you use it in the show?" Michael paused. Then he said, "Some things are not meant to be seen, they're meant to be known." That sentence was never written down. It was never recorded. But those who heard it never forgot it. Because it explained everything. Dance as a private language. For Michael Jackson, dance was not performance. It was communication. But not communication with the audience. Communication with himself. Every move he created was a sentence. Every sequence was a paragraph. Every routine was a story. And some stories are too personal to be told. The Ghost Step, many believe, was one of those stories. A story not meant for the world. A story meant for Michael. The myth begins to grow. As the years passed, the Ghost Step became less of a movement and more of a myth. Whispers spread among dancers. Stories were told in studios. Speculation flooded forums. Was it real? Was it exaggerated? Was it fake? Was it misunderstood? Some dismissed it as legend. Others claimed they had seen similar movements. But none could reproduce it. Not even close. Because the Ghost Step was not a trick. It was not a technique. It was not choreography. It was an expression of something internal. Something intangible. Something unteachable. The difference between movement and motion. Most dancers learn movement. Michael Jackson mastered motion. Movement is what the body does. Motion is what energy does. Michael didn't just move his body. He moved time. He moved expectation. He moved perception. When he walked backward, the world thought he was moving forward. When he leaned forward, the world thought he would fall. When he stopped moving, the world felt motion. And when he lifted, the world felt absence. Absence of gravity. Absence of explanation. Absence of certainty. The engineer's dilemma. Several engineers who reviewed rehearsal footage containing the ghost step reported the same problem. There was nothing to measure. No visible force. No visible mechanism. No visible acceleration. No visible jump. No visible support. The movement defied standard motion analysis. One engineer reportedly said, "It's like trying to measure a thought." And that might be the most accurate description. Because the ghost step was not a physical event. It was a mental event. A moment where intention overrode limitation. The illusion of control. Michael Jackson was often described as soft-spoken, gentle, shy. But beneath that gentleness was absolute control. Control over his voice. Control over his image. Control over his sound. Control over his body. He once said, "If you don't control your body controls you." And Michael refused to be controlled. Not by gravity. Not by fear. Not by expectation. Not by pain. Not by the world. The ghost step was perhaps the ultimate expression of that control, a moment where even the most fundamental force of nature seemed to hesitate. The relationship with gravity. Most dancers work with gravity. Michael Jackson worked against it. He didn't resist it violently. He didn't fight it aggressively. He didn't ignore it recklessly. He negotiated with it. He leaned into it. He leaned away from it. He balanced on it. He floated around it. And sometimes, he escaped it. Not permanently. Not dramatically. But briefly. Long enough to remind the world that the laws of nature are not always the limits of imagination. The emotional echo of the move. Those who witnessed the ghost step did not describe it as impressive. They described it as unsettling. Not in a frightening way. In a humbling way. Because it made them question their understanding of the human body. Of physics. Of possibility. And when art makes you question reality, that art becomes something more than art. It becomes experience. The silence afterward. After Michael retired the move, he never spoke of it again. Not to the press. Not to interviewers. Not to fans. Not even to most of his collaborators. It vanished. And Michael moved on. He focused on other innovations. Other illusions. Other performances. But something had changed. Those who worked with him noticed a subtle shift. He became quieter in rehearsal. More introspective. More focused on stillness. More focused on emotion. Less interested in spectacle. More interested in feeling. It was as if the ghost step had taught him something. And once learned, he no longer needed to perform it. The philosophy of the impossible. Michael Jackson did not believe in limits. He believed in thresholds. A limit is a wall. A threshold is a door. Michael spent his life opening doors. Doors in music. Doors in dance. Doors in performance. Doors in culture. Doors in imagination. The ghost step was one of those doors. But it opened inward, not outward. And some doors are not meant to be shared. The dancers who tried. Over the years, countless dancers have tried to recreate the ghost step. Some trained their core for years. Some practiced breath control. Some worked with yoga instructors. Some worked with martial artists. Some consulted physicists. Some attempted wire simulations. Some tried weighted shoes. Some tried reverse momentum techniques. None succeeded. Not even close. The closest anyone came was a brief, unstable lift, a fraction of a second followed by a stumble. And even that required extreme effort. Michael's version required none. It looked effortless, which is the most dangerous illusion of all. The difference between power and ease. Power is force. Ease is control. Michael Jackson never displayed power. He displayed ease. His movements were not strong. They were soft. They were not aggressive. They were gentle. They were not forceful. They were precise. And that precision created the illusion of effortlessness. The ghost step was the ultimate expression of that philosophy, a movement so effortless it erased the evidence of effort. The role of mindfulness. Long before mindfulness became mainstream, Michael practiced it instinctively. He was hyper-aware of his body, hyper-aware of his breath, hyper-aware of his posture, hyper-aware of his balance, hyper-aware of his tension, hyper-aware of his energy. He once told a choreographer, "If your mind is not calm, your body will scream." Michael's body never screamed. It whispered. And the ghost step was a whisper to gravity. The emotional state required. Those who observed Michael perform the ghost step noted something unusual. His emotional state during the move was different from anything else they had seen. He was not performing. He was not entertaining. He was not acting. He was present. Completely. Fully. Without distraction. Without ego. Without audience. Without performance. Just presence. And in that presence, the impossible happened. The science that couldn't explain it. Scientists have tried to reverse engineer the ghost step. They've analyzed biomechanics. They've studied muscle fiber composition. They've examined tendon elasticity. They've modeled center of mass shifts. They've explored microjump techniques. They've simulated body weight redistribution. Nothing explains a 3-second hover without visible force. Nothing, because science explains motion. But the ghost step was not motion. It was suspension. And suspension exists in a space science struggles to measure. The psychological element. Some psychologists believe the ghost step was not purely physical. They believe it involved a psychological phenomenon known as dissociation, a state in which the mind detaches from bodily sensation, allowing extreme control over pain, tension, and perception. In moments of dissociation, people have lifted cars, walked through fire, or endured impossible stress. Michael Jackson may have achieved a form of controlled dissociation, not for survival, but for art. In that state, the body obeys the mind without hesitation. And when the mind commands stillness, the body complies, even in midair. The legacy of unseen mastery. Michael Jackson's greatest gift to the world was not his voice, not his music, not his dance. It was his mastery. Mastery of sound, mastery of movement, mastery of emotion, mastery of imagination. And mastery does not always need to be seen. Sometimes mastery exists simply in knowing you can. The ghost step may never be seen by the public, but it exists, and its existence changes everything. Because if Michael Jackson could do something like that once, then the boundaries of human potential are wider than we ever imagined. The spiritual interpretation. Some believe the ghost step was spiritual, not religious. Spiritual. A moment where Michael transcended his physical form. A moment where he aligned with something greater. A moment where his body became a vessel for something beyond movement. Michael often spoke about feeling guided, inspired, connected. He spoke about music coming from somewhere else. He spoke about dance coming from somewhere else. He spoke about creativity as a gift, not a possession. And perhaps the ghost step was one of those gifts. A glimpse, a whisper, a moment. The man behind the myth. It's easy to see Michael Jackson as a legend, as a superstar, as an icon, as a myth. But behind all of that was a man. A man who felt deeply, who struggled deeply, who dreamed deeply, who hurt deeply, and who loved deeply. Dance was his refuge, his escape, his therapy, his language, his sanctuary. The ghost step may have been a moment of peace in a life filled with chaos. A moment where he felt weightless, not just physically but emotionally. The forgotten move. Why is the ghost step forgotten? Because it was never shown. Because it was never marketed. Because it was never exploited. Because it was never commercialized. Because it was never meant to be. In a world that demands visibility, performance, and proof, the ghost step existed quietly, privately, personally. And perhaps that's why it matters. Because not everything meaningful needs to be seen. Some things are meant to be known. The paradox of Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was the most visible person on earth, and yet the most invisible. Everyone saw him. Few knew him. Everyone heard him. Few understood him. Everyone watched him. Few saw him. If this story moved you, if it challenged your understanding of what's possible, if it made you feel something beyond explanation, then please subscribe, like, and share, so these untold stories of Michael Jackson continue to live on. Because legends are not built only on what we see. They are built on what we believe. And Michael Jackson gave us something worth believing in. Forever.